Ben Carson has thrown his support behind Donald Trump, which could actually be important because Ben Carson's supporters, a lot of them would have gone to Donald Trump without the endorsement, but many of them would go to Ted Cruz. We don't know how much that's going to influence where they end up, but it certainly doesn't hurt for Donald Trump. But it was more the way that he endorsed him that I want to talk about because it was in many ways as hilarious as Carson's campaign itself.
Yeah, he did it in his sleep. Weird.
He was just mumbling, but we got the gist of it, and you'll see that in this video.
I've come to know Donald Trump over the last few years. He is actually a very intelligent man who cares deeply about America. There are two different Donald Trumps.
Two Trumps.
At the very least.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. There are two Donald Trumps.
Two Trumps.
Two Donald Trumps.
Well, it's a good thing that he was standing behind a microphone at a podium when he endorsed Donald Trump, because if he would have been in the crowd, Donald Trump would have had him roughed up and thrown out.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
So he says there are the two, and he needs to say something like that because, of course, he was running against Donald Trump. And it was a pretty vicious...
he's endorsing the other Donald Trump.
He's endorsing the fictional one that he's crafting on the stage. But all of them, because not so much for Ben Carson, but the others, it was such a brutal, insulting sort of campaign that when they then turn around, like for instance, there was not this last debate, but there was the one before where they just hammered, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio especially, just hammered Trump over and over and over, said that he'd be a disaster. And then the last question is, would you support him? Yes.
Yeah, that was a fair amount of outrage to me there because it's different. Like, yes, you want to look at this cynically. You can look at it very cynically and say that in every campaign, every primary campaign, members of one party attack their opponents, like Hillary and Bernie are doing, and then almost certainly when one of them leaves the race, the other one is going to support the nominee. I don't think any, and probably enthusiastically support the nominee. Certainly, I hope so. No matter how it turns out, but we've never had a primary ever, or at least not in this century. We had them apparently in the 19th century. We had them with some regular. The 18th century we had them. But so if you say that he's unfit to man the nuclear codes, well then you can't say, of course, I'll support him.
Yeah, then there's no takebacks on
Then you have to say, well, hopefully there'll be a third-party candidate, or I'll sit it out, or I'll bite the bullet and say Hillary Clinton would be a terrible president, but I trust her with the nuclear codes. Like, that's a ballsy thing to say.
Or I don't trust either of them, so we're screwed.
So that's why this Carson thing is a little bit different, especially given the, I mean, he...
Well, and it's why he has to construct this two Trumps thing, but immediately, so, like, what does Trump think about this? Are there two Trumps? So he's going to answer that question, and in doing so, he is going to prove that it's 100% correct.
And when he says there are two Donald Trumps, do you agree with that characterization? And could you amplify on it?
I probably do agree. I think there are two Donald Trumps. There's the public version, and people see that, and I don't know what they see exactly, but it seems to have worked over my lifetime. Ben said it very well today. So perhaps there are two Donald Trumps.
A few moments later.
Why are there two Donald Trumps? Did you at some point make a conscious decision to behave differently in public?
I don't think there are two Donald Trumps. I think there's one Donald Trump.
Ay, ay, ay.
That was
apparently
the same press conference.
Same. It was just a few moments later.
What's that voice?
It's from SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay. It's Jared Jackson loves to throw that in there.
So I just
spice it up a bit.
You know what? It does make me feel uncomfortable that we're in a position, and I blame not only the Fox News, AM radio, and the right-wing blogosphere, but I also blame the mainstream news media for constantly giving free press and normalizing Trump's horribleness.
Yeah.
But so if and it does make me feel uncomfortable that in my country that a fascist racist could become president, right? Yeah. And there's people lining up behind him, governors of states, and this guy, but you got to just remember that there's positives if Trump becomes president, right? We'll have twice as many drinking fountains.
The worst. That is true.
Right.
That is true.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
I don't know when he's going to stop staring.
Shorter lines at the drinking fountain.
I have a quick question. So if you were running in the primaries and then you end up dropping out because you lost and you suck, do you have to endorse a candidate? Like, is there a rule? No. So why doesn't Carson just shut up and move on with his life?
He might believe that at best case scenario, if he actually wants to be involved in government, this is his best path to being involved in the administration, because Trump, as soon as you turn against him, he will set your entire family on fire. But if you say that he's the best person in the world, he doesn't care about anything he's said about you in the past, and he immediately becomes your best friend. Actually, in this clip, you're going to see a demonstration of that.
I know at one point you did say that reading his bio, you called him pathological. I guess that was just part of the game?
Well, it was part of the game, and all I was doing is trying to say exactly what he said, because he talked about his growing up, which was tough. And all I did was read parts of what he said, and then I hoped. So, but it all worked out.
But it all worked out. So he says that he's pathological, that he's violent. Remember him making fun of him stabbing people and all that? He compared him to a child molester.
He compared him
to.
to.
But that's just what he said. Why should he be bound by that?
You know, what's incredible is, look, this is exactly the kind of stuff that turns people off to politics, right? Just how insincere and, inauthentic people are, especially politicians. So I remember the first general election that I covered with the Young Turks was, when Hillary was battling Obama in the primaries. And as soon as Hillary lost the primaries, she was all of a sudden saying these really kind, nice things about President Obama, right? And it's like, but just like a month ago, you were saying some pretty hideous things about President Obama. Or at that time, he wasn't president. But I just remember getting very turned off to politics because of that.
That's interesting because, as I said, it's pretty standard. That was a pretty vicious primary campaign. It was again, we've now put that in perspective. It was 1/9 as vicious as this Republican campaign, and it was still pretty vicious comparatively. But that did turn people off. And so I think, in a sense, that this is, first of all, we know from Ben Carson, if we're to believe what we believed in the beginning, he didn't ever really think he had a shot at being president. It was an opportunity to sell books. Then here's why he wouldn't be silent now. This is
slander.
This is just more opportunity to sell books. I mean, have a press conference, people go. You're running out of moments where the national media will come listen to what you have to say. So this is the last opportunity for Carson to do that. So I'm not surprised. But I like the idea that maybe young people will get turned off of the process. I don't think there are a ton of young. Well, we know Trump has got some young voters, and there is a school of thought that there are some, if Bernie Sanders isn't the nominee, that some Bernie Sanders supporters will go to Trump because there is a similarity in tone and rhetoric, and that your jobs and you got screwed, even though, of course, the manner of the kind of president they'd be is a dramatically
He's the only
different.
other person speaking to those issues of working white, blue-collar people.
That's right.
Right, and also, look, I know what you're talking about. There was a recent poll. I don't quite remember who did the poll, but
I hadn't even seen a poll. I just saw some.
Yeah, there's a poll on this. Maybe you saw it, John. 33% of the people who support Bernie Sanders said that they would not vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election, which is disastrous. I mean, I don't agree with that position because I think that having Trump as our president would be
and it also, you say that now in the middle of it, and theoretically, let's pretend that Hillary wins, and if Bernie says what he's, and look, there's no candidate who's more a man of his word that we've seen running in some time than Bernie Sanders. He said he'll support the nominee. I think he'll do it enthusiastically. Some of those 33% are going to get convinced by the same guy they supported. They're going to get convinced by Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, that number, it sounds big, but I have to imagine that as the campaign goes on,
people
see Trump.
But people hate her, so some people won't. Some people won't vote for her.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons we don't want her to be the candidate. Is especially with independents, we don't think she's going to do that well.
I haven't seen John's poll, but 33% of
You're trying to say there's problems. I guarantee there's no problems.
That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, yeah, and it's fake, and unfortunately, in the case of it being Ben Carson has a million different faults that we've expounded on over the course of the past 6 months or so, but he is still seen as a nice guy overall.
And it's good that...
And when you get a nice guy to say this complete racist asshole is a nice guy, then you spread the nice guy around. And also, when the country at large has this window where maybe we'll do something about police brutality, and Trump is coming out and saying all lives matter, and oh God, why don't we praise the cops enough?
Most mistreated people in the country.
Most mistreated, and then you have an incredibly respected and prominent African-American politician saying he's the guy to go to. That's bad. It provides cover for some of Donald Trump's worst characteristics.
You think?